Okay, so welcome, hello everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today, and it's about calculating your business's carbon footprint. So just to set the context before we get into any detail, this is about the carbon footprint calculators that CAFs have developed. We have one for residents and one for businesses, and we're talking about the business one today. The two are very similar, so if you want to use the residents one after after attending today, it'll be very easy for you to do. These have been developed for us by Carbon Footprint Ltd. It's based on their existing carbon footprint calculator, which has been around for a while. So they've worked with us to just tweak it a bit and expand it a bit for our purposes. The whole thing has been funded by South Lakeland District Council. And although my role at CAFs is to promote and support the use of the calculator in South Lakes, it's free to use for any business and any resident in Cumbria and Lancashire. So just to introduce ourselves, I am Molly Hogg from CAFs, and I'm joined today by Chris Hodgson from Ambleside Action for a Future. Chris and other members of AFAF have worked very closely with me over the last few months to get the calculator ready, and it's very much part of their overall plan for Ambleside. And I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to steal Chris's thunder, but that's why Chris is here today. Chris is also a business owner, so he has that expertise as well. I'm also joined with Ro. Ro's here for the just for the Q&A. Ro will be supporting other communities outside of South Lakes, so she's here on hand for anybody outside of my particular patch. Okay, so the agenda for today. I'll be starting off with just explaining for anyone who's not really clear on what a carbon footprint is, just to clarify that so we all know what we're talking about. I'll then hand over to Chris, who'll be talking about why it's the good thing to do, what benefits you'll get from it. And then it's back to me for the detailed walkthrough of the calculator itself. I'll then be telling you about what support we can offer at CAFs and what other organisations, what support they can offer. And this is about actually taking action to reduce your carbon footprint. We'll then have a quick poll and then the Q&A session at the end. And hopefully we'll wrap up within an hour. Okay, so what is a carbon footprint? So carbon is shorthand. It's a shorthand term for all of the greenhouse gases because carbon dioxide is the most prevalent one. And the footprint bit means the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted from a particular activity. And it's measured in kilograms or tons of CO2e. So you can measure the carbon footprint of absolutely anything you want. You can measure of a bowl of chips or a flight or a holiday, and it's totally up to you to decide what you want to measure and where you draw the line around it. So if your business, it might just be one aspect of your business, or it might be your entire business. And then you can go into different levels of detail, again, depending on how far you want to go with it. So for the chips, you might want to consider the emissions from growing the potatoes, packaging the potatoes, transporting them, selling them, and then cooking them. If you're thinking about a flight, you might just think about the emissions from the plane fuel. But also, if you wanted to go further, you might think about all of the emissions that came from the processes to manufacture that plane in the first place. And then you might also want to think about all of the things that were consumed inside the plane during the flight, including the in-flight food, which we looked at chips and what all of the different emissions come from in terms of food. If you're then looking at a holiday, you've both got your flight to get there, all the food that you consume when you were there, and then you've got all the other things like your hotel and all the activities that you might want to get involved in. Now, there's lots of complexities around how you account for your carbon footprint and your emissions, and you probably heard of things like scope 1, 2 and 3, or you might have heard of production emissions and consumption emissions. Now, I'm not going to go into that now, but if people are particularly interested in getting more clarity over that, please just pop a question in the Q&A and I'll answer that afterwards. So in terms of our calculator, ours is set up to measure a year in the life of your business, and it tries to look at the full range of areas where there will be emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So that will include all the energy you use within your premises, business travel. It can also include commute to work if you chose to include your commute to work, but also the water you use, the waste you generate, And then the big bit is the goods, all the goods and services that you consume as a business. Now, there is a bit of a caveat that this is a standardized tool, and we've tried to go into a reasonable level of detail to give an accurate enough picture to be useful, but it's not going to cover every single thing that every single business consumes, because it would just be too wide a scope for it. So, for example, it doesn't tackle agricultural emissions. And you'll see when I go through the calculator what's included. So that's enough for me for now, and I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk about the benefits.
Thank you, Molly, and hi to everybody. Just to introduce myself a little bit more, we run a bed and breakfast in Ambleside, so as well as the interest with the Ambleside community group, we are a business owner, and we've done this calculation ourselves, and we used it very much for us as being the start point of our journey. So we were interested in trying to become a more sustainable business, and this gave us a really good indication of where or what things went in to make up our carbon footprint. Just going through the process itself and doing the calculation was quite revealing. So for ourselves, it was quite scary to see how much the energy that we use, the food that we buy, the food waste that we have as a business contributed towards our carbon footprint. But of course, at least once you know what's contributing, you can do something about it. And we've actually made some changes in our business as a result of that. I think as a business, we're all used to working with numbers, whether it's sales targets, profit targets. We're a hospitality business, so we look at occupancy levels. So I think wherever your business is, we're used to working with numerical targets. So here's another one for you, your carbon footprint target. The thing I would say is it's definitely a number that you're looking to reduce rather than increase. But one of the things that we found as a small business is that generally, if we improve our carbon footprint, then it usually leads to a lower cost base as well, and therefore an improvement in our profitability. Not always, but usually that's the general trend. I think the other thing that we were aware of and why we wanted to look at this in more detail was that we're aware that the landscape that we operate a business in is changing quite rapidly at the moment. We know that the UK have got an ambition to become net carbon zero by 2050, and in Cumbria we've got a target of 2037. So we wanted to feel as if we were contributing towards that achievement and towards the collective effort as well, and make reductions for our own business as well as the wider county and wider country as well. I think some of the larger companies, if you've already got more than 250 employees or £36 million of sales, you're already having to report your carbon footprint. It could well be that all businesses have got to do this in the future. Whether it quite reaches the level of going down to a small business, I'm not quite sure. But at least if you've done this, you know where you stand as a business, and you can start taking some actions to reduce it. I think the last thing I would say is that we also we've got another benefit out of this, which is that we actually use it now as a competitive advantage. I will hasten to add that we are definitely not the finished article as a business. We regard this as being a journey that we're on, and we're partway down that journey. But we've signed up to a green accreditation scheme, which we've made progress with, and we use that in our marketing now. I think we're all aware that customers, guests, are a lot more discerning in their choices now, and they're looking to use services, looking to shop, looking to stay with places that are representing a lot more sustainable options. So we felt as if this was quite a big benefit to us as a result of taking the action that we have done. So I think that's it for the moment, Molly. I'll happily pick up any questions and answers towards the end of the session, but I'll pass back across to you for the time being.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. I'm going to now share a different screen, so you have to bear with me for a second, because I'm going to show you where the calculator is on our website and walk you through it. So just give me 2 seconds and I will find that. Okay, can everybody now see the CAF's website? Can I have a thumbs up from Chris and Ro, because I can't see anybody else? Yeah, wonderful, thank you. Okay, so to use the calculator, you first need to go to the CAF's website. So that's here, and the link's in the chat. So it's cafs.org.uk. And the link to the calculator, if you scroll down on the home page, And then we've got a button here, carbon footprint calculators, under popular services. So if you click onto that, and then we're onto the carbon calculator page. There's 2 pages. The first page is context, covering things that Chris and I have already talked about this morning, and you'll see a couple of videos there which just recap on that. And there's a bit about offsetting, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end. And if you go to the bottom and click next, you're then onto this step-by-step guide for how to use the calculator, which is also I'm going to go through now. And then at the bottom is the links to the calculators themselves. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning, so the calculator is probably more suitable for a small and medium-sized business. If your business is particularly large, you might find this is a bit too limited for you unless you wanted to focus just on one particular aspect of your business, which you could do. Another thing to note is that if you're on a mobile device, the calculator doesn't quite format as well as other apps. So there's a second link which is slightly better. You might just have to scroll across a little bit to get the full thing onto one window. But if you're just on a normal PC, laptop, just click on the top link. So I'm going to click on the business one here. And it takes you to the sign-in page. So first of all, to be able to use the calculator, you need to create an account. And the reason that you need to do this is so that your data is then saved. And that's really good for you because hopefully it's something that you want to come back and revisit and see how much your carbon footprint has reduced after you've taken action. So you can go back in and all your data that you previously put in has been saved. So to do that, you just put in your email address. I'm just going to make one up. I'm going to pick on Chris because he's here. So I'm going to be chris@hmail.com. No password for now. You click create an account. And then it asks you for a little bit of information. So on the business one, it initially asks you about personal information. So this is in case you want to also calculate your personal carbon footprint, which means you can use both calculators. If you don't want to put that in, you can just skip that page and you can press continue. So you need to put your name in first. So SH and continue. That then goes into the business information section, and it's your business name, what sector you're in, your business postcode, and then a question about how committed are you to being a low carbon business. And the reason we collect this information is so that from CAF's point of view, we can see where we're reaching really, which businesses are interested, who's finding it useful, and whether we're just reaching people that are already really committed or whether we're actually making some progress with people that haven't really thought about it much before. So that's the reason for collecting that information. So if you were to do it, you would then click Save Business Details, and it would send you a link where you can, with a temporary password, and you can then access your account. So I'm going to cancel that because I already have an account. And I'm going to just sign in as myself. And log in. Okay, so this is the calculator itself. Hopefully you can see that. Rowan, Chris, does that seem big enough to you to see the detail? Yeah, okay, hopefully that's fine for everybody else. So at the top here, you just have some links so you can change your details if you want to. You can change your email address, change your password, etc. Log out. You can also delete your account if you decide you don't want it anymore and you don't want us to save your data anymore. This is then the switch between the business calculator or the residential one, so you can use both. You only need one account. If you haven't already filled in your residential information, when you click switch, it will then take you back to that sign-in box where you add the information. But otherwise, once you've done that, you can just switch between the two. So I'm on the business one today.
Molly,
yes.
Could you just make it a little bit larger? We've got people who can't actually see that very well.
Is that better? Oh, that's made the top bit. Expanded the top bit. Is that? I think that's probably as big as I can go. Is that okay? Apologies to anyone that's struggling to see it. It's quite a lot of detail for one screen. Okay, the next thing to point out is this bit here, select year for calculation. So we have a license to use this for 5 years. So each of those 5 years is the year before that you'd start with as your baseline. So from 2020 up to 2024. And we've also got a tab here called experimental. So you might just want to, once you've done it and you've saved your data, you might just want to play around with it and say, well, actually, if I completely change this, if I move to an electric fleet, for example, what impact would that have? So you can create new sets that you can play around with, and it doesn't mess up your actual data. So click the year that you're interested in. And then we have a series of tabs here for where you enter the data itself. So the first tab is about how many employees you have in your business. Now, this is quite important to fill this in because the calculator calculates it for the whole business, and it then gives you a benchmark on your footprint per employee. And when you get the report at the end, it will show you how that then compares to other businesses, so you can get a feel for whether you're high or low or on a par with other businesses in the UK. So that's the first page. So you enter your data and click save. Then moving on to your building. So there's one home for all the different types of fuel that you use in your building. So if you have multiple premises, then you can either create a separate, have a different calculation for each different business premises if you wanted to, or you can add it all up in advance and enter a single figure. So I should have said before I started into this, it's quite good once you've seen what information is required, it's quite good to do that background collating of information before you get started, because lots of these tabs involve finding information from different places. So if you've all got it to hand in a file or in a spreadsheet or however you work, that will make it quicker when you actually go to inputting it into the spreadsheet in the first place. So your building energy, as you can see here, is a whole range of different energy types, electricity, natural gas probably being the main ones. So you'd input here how many kilowatt hours of electricity your business used throughout that entire year. So you can get this from your energy bills. You might need to add them up, but you might get a yearly summary that you can put in. I'm just going to make one up here. So I'm going to put 20,000 kilowatt hours. The factor here represents the carbon intensity of the grid. So if your electricity is coming from the grid, then just leave that as it is, because that represents the current amount of renewable energy that is factoring into the grid. So even if you're on 100% renewable tariff, use that factor. You'd only change that if you had perhaps a private supply to a wind farm and you knew absolutely 100% all of your electricity was green, and then your factor would go right down. So you might put in a similar factor for your data for your gas usage if your business uses gas in kilowatt hours. You can change the units if you are metered in different units, and then any other fuel that you use within your building. You then click calculate and save, and you'll see that those amounts appear at the bottom, and it tells you how much carbon or carbon equivalent that generates at the bottom here. If you made a mistake, you can remove. If you want to add another one, simply put it into the box and click calculate and save, and it will just add another one to the list. Okay, then moving on, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all to do with travel, and there's a different tab for the different modes of travel. The first one is flights, and you can enter up to 5 flight itineraries. If you have more than these, then you can increase your number of trips, perhaps for a similar type of journey if you needed to factor more in, but hopefully 5 is enough for most small or medium-sized businesses. So you can click return trip or one way, probably most of it would be return trip, I would guess, and you put it in from the airports. You don't need to know the miles yourself, you just put in the airport. So let's imagine it was a business trip, say from Manchester to Paris, something nice, going to see a supplier. You can put in a via airport if you need to. You can select the class, and you can select the number of trips that you made on that particular route. And if you were going with a colleague, then you would put 2 in there because there's 2 of you traveling, so that's twice as much emissions for your company. And again, you would click calculate and save. If you then wanted another trip, you would put it in again, calculate and save, and it appears as an additional line. Car and van, you can put up to 5 cars or vans. For electric vehicles, you don't need to include that here. So because they run on electricity, your electricity would be accounted for within your building energy consumption. Now, if you, that's very simple. If you have a charge point at work, it would just be on your energy bills, but it might be that you might charge your work vehicle at home, or you might charge it at a public charge point, in which case you would need to use those bills, those accounts to add that particular amount of electricity you used for your work vehicle and add it into this this box here under building energy. So for other types of vehicles, so petrol and diesel vehicles, you add it in terms of mileage. So say it's, I don't know, 10,000 miles, or you could put it in kilometres. The EU car database is default, so just leave that, and you find your car type by first of all selecting for the year of manufacture. Just going to select a completely random one here. I'm going to have a Ford car, and then whatever derivative, and then it finds the energy, the carbon intensity of that particular car, the emissions from that car, and based on those miles you then calculate and save again, and it tells you the carbon footprint of that car. And again, you can add up to 5 cars on that. Now, cars is slightly different from the other forms of transport in that if 3 of you went in the same car, it doesn't make any difference. You still just put in the amount of miles you travel. You don't have to multiply that up for car travel. It's only when you're on sort of more public transport you need to include for each individual that travelled with you. Motorbikes is a lot simpler. Again, you add the miles, and it's just small, medium or large motorbikes, so there's not the full range of makes and models there. And again, you can add up to 5. Now, vehicle fuel, you might choose, depending on if you do have a large fleet, and you might have some system for fuel cards, for example, for adding the fuel. And it might be easier for you to add the amount of fuel you've used rather than the mileage you've driven. So it will really be determined by however you account for it within your business, what's ever easier. You might also have additional fuel that's not related to vehicles that you might want to add here. So maybe you use a diesel generator if you're a construction business or something like that. You can add different fuel types in here, and again calculate and save. The last travel tab is bus and rail. So this is all the different types of public transport that you could take for your business. Now, as I said earlier, you could just be strict and just say it's purely to do with business travel, or if you're interested, if you have maybe a larger number of staff, you're interested in sustainable travel plans and supporting your staff to get to work through sustainable modes, you might want to include commute as well in this. And it's just, as I said right at the start, it's up to you where you draw the line around it, but just be consistent. So when you come back to compare it, you're comparing apples with apples. Waste, first of all, you have to select the waste type that you're interested in. So if it was, let's say, mixed recycling, I would select mixed there, and then subtype. It then goes into whether it's commercial or domestic waste. So this will always be commercial waste for you, I imagine, as it's the business. And then the disposal method. So in this case, it would be recycled. It might be that if you're talking about general waste, you might not know what happens to your waste once it's taken away. So if you wanted to be accurate, you could then look into your waste collector and where the waste went to, whether it went to landfill or whether it went to maybe an energy from waste plant. So I'll put my recycled waste here. And you enter the quantity. Now, hopefully you'll have that from waste transfer notes or some kind of record. If not, you can estimate it. If you dispose of it slightly differently, you can estimate the size of your wheelie bin and how much weight might be in that. So you put your kilograms in here, and this will be based on the whole year. So 1,000 kilograms. So these figures won't be accurate. I'm just putting it in, so I've got some data to show you here. Then we have water, which is very straightforward, the amount of water that you used. And again, if you're metered, you can get that from your bills. If not, you might be able to find an estimate based on your type of business and what a typical benchmark might be for your business. Let me save. So finally, we get to the goods and services tab, which is slightly different from the others because this is a very wide range of things you can put in here. It is the original calculator from Carbon Footprint Limited was designed for individuals. So some of these things might seem to be more focused around your lifestyle rather than your business, but we hope that actually if you read this in the context of a business, it will be applicable to you as well. So for example, food and drink products, if you're a hospitality business, you can put in the amount of money that you spend on the food that you buy into your business here, and you can put it in either per month, per year, per month, or per week, whichever way is easiest for you to account for it. So say per week, I don't know, maybe you spend £500 on food. You can look down here at the other types of products that your business might consume. So there's clothes, textiles and shoes. So if you're retail, that might be relevant to you. You could put in the value of your stock each year, paper products, electronics. It probably won't really account for, again, if you are a construction business or a trade, it doesn't really account for building materials. That's a little bit of a gap in it. But it does have things like furniture and other manufactured goods. So you could maybe choose, if you really wanted to kind of reflect that, you could maybe choose something that was as close as it could be to what you use in your actual business. We then have the bottom section is services. So your telephone usage, banking and finance, insurance, education, so courses that you go on, your staff go on, recreational, cultural and sporting activities. So say if you are a tourism business and you run activities for your clients, you could account for the value of those per year. So again, we calculate and save, and that adds it to your footprint. So we're getting there now. This is all of the data input, and then we are now finally on the results page. Now, mine won't be a particularly accurate reflection because I've just thrown in a bit of data there to generate some results. So you can see you get a pie chart, and this tells you, this is a really useful bit, I think. It tells you the magnitude of emissions from the different parts of your business. So you can really see where the potential is to bring those down. It's not to say that you shouldn't tackle the easy wins and the little bits. We need to tackle everything, but it can help you to prioritize and see what's really worth kind of all that energy. So listed here from the different tabs is the carbon footprint related to each one, and then your total here, and then your average per employee. So if you download the report will then show you the benchmark information that I mentioned earlier. So you can compare your business to, I think it's just to an office-based business or a higher energy use business. So it's only 2 benchmarks. So again, it's not desperately detailed, but it will give you a feel for how you compare to others. Just to note as well that report, it does include some advice. This is a Carbon Footprint Limited report. So this is from our developer. It's not from CAF's. The CAF's advice here is if you click on the link View Guide. So this will take you back to the page on the CAF's website, and I'll explain a bit later about what advice we have on there. So this is lots of things, that tips, signposts to where you can get some advice on how to reduce your carbon footprint. Finally, you have the option, if you want to offset your carbon footprint, and this is a link to the Carbon Footprint Limited offsetting program. Now, we've had lots of discussion about this. Chris and I in particular have debated this at length, and offsetting is a controversial area, and both CAFS and Ambleside Action for a Future firmly believe that the absolute priority should be in reduction. It should never be an excuse to carry on emitting when you don't need to emit. So that's the kind of, that's the context. But also there is a role for offsetting. If we're doing absolutely everything we can and we need to get to net zero, that net bit requires a bit of offsetting as well. So it's totally up to you whether or not you want to go down that route. And also it's totally up to you which offsetting program you want to choose if you do want to go down that route. This is Carbon Footprints one. If you're interested, just go and have a browse, have a look, see what standards they're certified to, and then make your own decision. So that is it from me, I think, on that. Is there anything I've missed, Chris?
No, we've got quite a few questions cropping up, Molly, which I suggest if we work our way through, and then I think we should be able to answer most of them.
Right. Okay. Lovely. I will just quickly finish off. I'll go back to the slides and just to outline the support there is, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. So I'm just going to stop sharing that. And So bear with me for 2 seconds. Apologies, everybody. I've got lots of screens open. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see my slides again? Yeah, lovely. Okay. We're done using the calculator. Support to reduce your emissions. So this is just finishing off now then. So as I mentioned, on the CAF's website, we've got lots of advice. So we've got For Your Business Guide, which is imminent. It's written, it's just a case of posting it on the website. And that should be hopefully a good starting point for you to the broad kind of strategy, and also signpost to more sector specific guides, different types of accreditations you can go for. Chris mentioned the one that they've gone for their business. So there should be lots of different things that you you'll find helpful there for your business of where to start. We've also expanded our sustainable living guide. This is written with individuals in mind, but the principles will be equally applicable to businesses. So around the energy efficiency of your building envelope and building services, about the carbon impact of food, about travel, all of those things will be relevant. So even though it's written towards the individual, it's worth a read. What we're also going to be doing from April onwards is setting up a series of online carbon reduction advice sessions. So this is in the kind of the surgery format. This is very much wanting to be led by businesses. So come along, we'll have a small number of businesses, we'll have business advisors supporting us in those sessions, and it'll be a chance for you to really ask your questions and put forward your ideas, test them out with us, get some direction for where you want to go. And that's equally open to businesses that are just starting to think about this, and also businesses that you've already done a lot of work and there's a really kind of maybe a technical question and you want to know where to go next to break through the next barrier. So hopefully we'll be able to support more people through those sessions. We might, if we're able, have some in-person drop-in sessions in Ambleside as part of that Ambleside project or push, ambition, whatever we want to call it. And also CAFs have the CAFs energy services. Now again, I'm starting to repeat myself, this is aimed primarily at homeowners, but again, if your business has relatively simple premises, it's equally applicable, and we're starting to see more and more requests for energy audits for community buildings and businesses, and we're starting to take those on. So if you're interested in an energy audit of your premises, do please get in touch with our energy team. I will just quickly put into the chat the links to those actually 2 seconds, and I'll just go through these first and I'll put some links in the chat. So these are other support that are offered by other organisations within Cumbria that we've worked with. First of all, there's a new grant from the Lake District National Park working with the Lake District Foundation, and this is a low carbon investment grant, and it's up to £20,000 investment, and you'd need to match that 50-50. And this is for anything that you can demonstrate that will make an impact, have a significant impact in reducing your carbon emissions. So there's a link which I'll post in the chat so you can go and investigate the criteria for that grant. Now that is only, you need to have some kind of business activity within the Lake District to be eligible for that grant. What's also on offer is the support from the Eco Innovation Northwest project. So this is a collaboration between, I think, 6 different universities, including the University of Cumbria, and they can provide free research support to your business. So if you have an innovation idea that you're interested in but don't really have the time or resources to investigate it, they can come along, they can provide somebody to do that investigation for you. And then I have links to three business support organisations here. All have slightly different expertise and different angles, so there should be a range of expertise there that you can call upon. So there's Green Small Business, Future Fixers, and Lancaster. And I think we have some of those on the call here, so feel free to pop anything in the chat. Green Small Business and Future Fixers are also supported in some respects by South Lakes, so you might find you get a good deal for the support there because they've got the backing of South Lakes. So I'm just going to pop those links in the chat so they're there before I forget. And I can't find the chat box now. I will find that in a minute, and I will just move on to the poll. So this is just a quick series of questions, if we can get from you first, just to get a feel for your thinking. So you just click on your answer and then submit. So there's just 4 questions. I'm going to launch that poll in now. So the first one, how likely are you to measure your carbon footprint? And if you're not, just feedback on why you might not use our calculator, so that can help us in the future. Whether you might be interested in taking advantage of our online carbon reduction advice sessions. And if so, what topics you might be interested in. Okay, I've got some answers coming in now. And in the meantime, I can see the chat. Okay, I've posted those links into the chat now. Okay, 18 out of 34 voted. If there's anybody that wants to vote, you can just pop your answers in, that would be great, and then I'll share the results. Just give it another 30 seconds and then we'll close the poll. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. 5 more seconds. Okay. Let's have a look. Okay, can you see the results of the poll there? Nodding from Ro and Chris, the only people I can see. Okay, so that's great. Most of you are very likely to use the calculator. I'm really pleased about that. That's great. And most of you, it's not applicable. Some people think it's too complicated. I think that's fair enough. Doesn't fit the scope of my business. I'd be interested to know who voted that and what your business was, just to see who we are missing out on there, and found a different calculator that I prefer, and also interested in other calculators. There are lots out there. They keep popping up. This isn't the only one, and if you feel free to use whichever one you like, whatever suits you best. Quite likely to take advantage of our free advice sessions. That's great. We will be publishing details about those very soon. And oh, interesting. Lots of you interested in circular economy. That's great. I'm particularly interested in that myself. So yes, a range of topics. So, okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much for that. Okay, Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing. Right, it looks like, I'm just looking at the Q&A box, and it looks like Chris has answered a couple of questions already. So Hannah's question, if you make a mistake, is it easy to update? And yes, you can just, where the numbers come at the bottom, those lines you just remove and then you redo it, so that's fine. And then Stuart asking about the grant. Yes, that was the one I just mentioned there from the Lake District Foundation. And then 12 questions open, okay. There's no option to heat your place with a wood-burning stove. Yes, there is. I didn't mention it, but there is. Actually, it might be helpful if I reshare the calculator and I can show you where it is. I'll come back to that at the end because there might be other questions, but don't let me forget about that. But yes, you can account for wood. Tim, are the assumptions that are built into the model consistent with the greenhouse gas protocol? Some of the net zero pledges standards, e.g. pledge to net zero, require any footprinting to be consistent with the protocol. So it'd be good to know if the calculator could be used for those purposes. Thanks. It's consistent in that it uses the published, the government's published greenhouse gas factors. So whatever you are measuring, the factor is correct and it's updated every year as the new factors come out. So for example, with electricity, every year there's more and more renewables coming onto the grid. So it becomes greener, less carbon intensive. So that's reflected. In terms of the greenhouse gas protocol, this is the methodology, and this is around what I mentioned before about scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3. So in a way it is because it includes scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3. It's all together. It doesn't, I suppose it does keep them separate, because at the end on the new results page you can see the different emissions from the different aspects of your business. So just quickly, scope 1 is emissions that come directly out of your chimney or out of your exhaust pipe of your car, where gases are literally emitted from where you are. Scope 2 is electricity. So this is energy, fuel that you use, but is actually been burnt somewhere else, and then you're benefiting from it. And then scope 3 is absolutely everything else, everything that you consume that has been manufactured somewhere else and has emitted gases somewhere else, but you're responsible for it because you're the one that's bought it and consumed it. So yes, it does follow the protocol in terms of separately accounting for those different emissions and using the correct emissions factors. And it's also accredited, and I can't remember exactly by who, but it is a verified carbon footprinting tool. So yes, you can rely on it. Okay, I'm aware that I'm doing all the talking here. Feel free to chip in, Chris and Ro, if you want to. As 2020 was an unusual year, is there a way to factor in that many companies will have dramatically reduced their footprint due to home working or reduced opening? Yeah, this is really hard. I don't think we really have an answer. Chris, I'm going to let you answer that one.
I think the thing you could do is to use your 2019 figures or any 12-month period up until we started a lockdown, if that's how your business was affected. We've used 2019 stats for ours, and we're just going to take 2020 as being an anomaly year, and then we can compare one year with the next and know that we're comparing like for like rather than taking out an unusual year. It's a very fair question, though. It's difficult for us all to compare with that in mind.
Yeah, I think it's going to be depressing as well, because it's likely that they will go up again. It'd be great if that could be the baseline and continue to go down, because that's what we need. But yeah, that's quite a challenge. Okay, Rosie, when entering the building inputs, how do you record business and residential at the same time? So I don't know whether this question is because sometimes you might have a business operating from home. I don't know whether that was why you've asked. If that is the case, it's up to you whether or not you want to try and separate them out and say, well, this amount is from business, this is the amount for my home. Chris, do you want to interject there?
Yeah, we're in that situation as well, you see. We run our business is our home as well. So we just made a judgment, and for instance, on the energy costs, we took about 80% as being relevant to the business and 20% towards domestic. So there's a degree of having to make a judgment about what's right for you and your particular circumstances. So we treated them separately, and we've actually done a footprint for our business, and then we've done one as a resident as well. So we've got two different analyses using two different sets of figures.
Yeah. So if you're not working from home, if your question was separate, if you have two different sets of data, you just switch on the calculator, you just click switch onto the other tool, and then you input it separately. That doesn't overwrite. So say if you switch to the residential one, that doesn't overwrite what you put into the business one. They're two separate sets of data. And actually, if you wanted to create another one for whatever it might be, so you've got two very different types of business, just create a new account, create a different username. I'm not sure whether you need a different email address to do that, but give me a shout if you struggle. But yeah, you should be able to create as many separate data sets as you want. Okay, surely the waste goes to different places, some recycle, some burn for energy, some to landfill. How does that work? It really depends on where you live and what happens to your particular waste. It was difficult for us to do it because it's Cumbria wide and the different districts have different systems for their waste collection, and it was particularly difficult in the residents calculator because everyone has different receptacles as well and different frequencies of collection. So you should be, it's a little bit clunky, that drop down list, but you should be able to select which waste type and then where it goes, and you then click calculate and save and it adds it in. If you then have a second waste type that's different, do it again and then it'll add a second line. It won't overwrite it. So you add as many lines as you need for as many different waste types as you have. I hope that answers the question. And yes, if you're not sure whether it's landfill or whether it's combustion, just try and try and find out from your council what happens to it. You should be able to find the information somewhere. I think there are plans for a new energy from waste plant in Cumbria, but I might be wrong. But I think that's the direction. It tends to be going away from landfill and up to energy from waste. Yes, Chris.
Molly, I've just seen someone's just gone and raised their hand to I think interject on that particular point.
Okay. Sorry, excuse my lack of skill with Zoom and how to allow that person to speak. Could you possibly, whoever raised their hand, could you possibly put a comment in the chat box while I work out how to allow you to speak? Oh, I can. Quentin, allowed to talk.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I'm really enjoying this, but some of the questions that you're reading out aren't appearing in either my Q&A box when I've got that up or the chat box. I'm wondering if I'm somehow missing it. And also I put 2 questions up which haven't been addressed, so I'm a bit concerned you may not have seen the 2 questions I posted. One was about the intensity when you're filling in your electricity usage and why you don't get any kind of carbon credit if you pay extra for renewable electricity. And then the other one was about carbon offset scheme and whether I was wondering, in terms of making this attractive to people in Cumbria, whether individuals and businesses might want to contribute to a local carbon offset scheme. At present, my business pays for one up in Scotland because that was the a tree planting scheme in Scotland we found. But I think a lot of people might like the idea of contributing to tree planting or peatland restoration in Cumbria or something like that.
Yeah, okay. Yes, just to let you know, I can see your questions. Apologies if I haven't got the settings right so everyone can see the questions. They are on there, and I'll tackle those ones now, Quentin. So your first question, well, I'll tackle that second one first, because you just mentioned it. Yes, absolutely. You can not offset if you don't want to offset, or you can choose any offsetting program you wish. You can choose to offset your full carbon footprint or partially offset your carbon footprint, so it's totally up to you. And yes, there are, if you chose to go through Carbon Footprint Limited, there is an option that you can choose local tree planting. And the way that works is that I think for every tree that gets planted locally, a tree is planted in the rainforest, or there's the equivalent amount of work to prevent deforestation in the rainforest, and that is accredited for offset, so that's verified, and then the equivalent local benefit is a local tree planted. So that's an option through that scheme. But yes, there's lots of other programs that you can find locally. There's the it's one you sent the link to. Was it the Cumbria Wildlife Trust, Chris?
Yeah, it was Cumbria Wildlife Trust. Maybe if we can get that up on the CAT's website and available as a link as well, because that did look like quite a good regional scheme.
Yeah, I think that one it's was that peatland? It might have been. Yeah. Peatland. I don't think that was verified. Whether or not that matters to you is again up to you, but it's local and it's doing it's doing great work to restore peatland, so that might be one that you want to explore. And then your other question, Quentin, why do we use the same intensity when we pay extra for renewable energy from a green electricity supply company? So when you choose a green tariff, what that means is that the money you pay gets invested in renewables, and that is helping to green the grid. So every time people switch, and you should absolutely switch if you haven't already, that means that money is channeled into wind farms primarily, and that helps the whole kind of UK grid to decarbonise. But when you actually think about the electrons that come through your plug, they are just coming from the whole mix that is in the grid itself, and that is a combination of wind and a little bit of solar and a bit of nuclear and then some residual coal and gas. So it has to reflect the whole grid, because that's the kind of reality of it. But absolutely, it is worth you sticking with your renewable energy supply, because that is helping to decarbonise the grid. And the more people that switch, the more investment that can go into offshore wind, primarily in the UK. Okay, lovely. I will just try and change my settings. Oh, sorry. Okay. I think hopefully you might be able to see the questions now. I've just found a settings box. Okay, I'm going to scroll up to where I got up to before. Waste. Question from Tim: are there plans to expand the scope of goods and services included so that the list is relevant to an even wider range of businesses? Unfortunately, not at the moment within this calculator. It was as full a range as we could afford within our budget at the moment, and we have the 5-year license to use it. Feedback would be good if there are real gaps. I know agriculture is a gap, and trades are probably a bit of a gap as well. What I would recommend is, if it isn't particularly suitable, we might be able to signpost you to places that can do a personalised carbon footprint for you. I don't know whether we could find any that were subsidised or particularly cheap to do, but there would be other ways of working it out, but unfortunately not within our calculator. It was a case of trying to find a balance of something that was accessible enough and simple enough to use without putting people off, but also trying to be as full a scope as we could manage. So apologies to anybody that this doesn't tick every box for. Carol missed the webinar about the LDF Green Grant. Any idea when the fund might actually open? How certain is it will happen? Chris, you attended that webinar. I think I missed that one. Do you want to?
Yeah, the link isn't quite open yet. The web page is up there, and they're literally waiting for the funds to be confirmed any second. I keep clicking on it literally on a daily basis, to not that I'm trying to get all the money for a grant for ourselves, but it should literally be available any day now, I think. And certainly if you go on that link that Molly popped up earlier, you'll see full details of this scheme and the eligibility. It's essentially aiming to fund any project which you can prove is going to be carbon reducing in your company. So whether that's electric vehicle charge points, whether it's a renewable energy scheme, it's up to you to decide what that project is. And as Molly said, it's available on a 50-50 basis. So it's a fantastic scheme. It really is. So I would encourage anyone to apply there if you think you've got a relevant project.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I've just popped in the chat because I'm aware we're coming up to 11 o'clock. People might start to drift off now if they've got other things to do. We've got a feedback form. If people would be really kind to fill that in, I've just posted the link. It really helps us to learn how effective these webinars are and inform future events. And also the CAF's donation page. I hate to ask, but we are a charity, and any donations that you're able to give can help kind of fund events like this. So those 2 links are there. Okay, we have a few more questions. Let's have a look where we got to. Monique, for houses, is there any way of getting personal advice on lower carbon heating? Yes, absolutely. Our energy team provide a lot of advice. They've got a question time event coming up on, Ro, do you mind just quickly checking the date? I think it's the 26th of March, I think. So that's a drop-in session. Ask any questions on how to improve the energy efficiency, low carbon heating questions. There, you can also just phone the energy team. Again, Ro, would you mind putting the phone number in there as well while I'm talking? That would be great. So they will offer a free advice call if it's relatively simple questions they can answer, or there can be, you can apply, or you can request a longer advice session if you want to go into detail. So just keep an eye on the CAF's website. There's loads of information on the website, on the sustainable living page and on the your home page that really goes into this in detail. So yeah, any queries, please just get in touch. Rosie, we have lots of waste to dispose of which we don't create. Our customers leave lots of rubbish and recycling. Should we account for all of this as ours?
Molly, can I just dive in on that one, because we have the same situation in our B&B. Yes, we do account for it all, and there is a little bit about, are you trying to measure a carbon footprint of yourself or your business? And so we do account for it in our calculation for our business. So yes, that does mean all the recycling waste, all of the food waste that is, whether it's we create it or whether guests have left it, all goes into the same place. So we do account for it, and I think that's a decision everyone can make for their own business.
Sorry, I've just noticed that I've been posting chat just to panelists rather than attendees. Apologies, I'm not doing very well today, so I'll put that in. Hopefully people will be able to see that now. Okay, one more question that I've got on this list here from Mark. The calculator appears to be more for smaller businesses. Is there a recommendation from you for a calculation method for larger businesses of say 400 or more employees? I'm not aware of an online free calculator that would do that. There are businesses that would be able to do that for you. So if Tim's made a couple of comments here, I'm not sure whether Tim would be able to do it, or there's CBEN, I think, might be able to do it. Ro, you were in touch with them recently. I think they might be able to do that. And yes, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think when we set out to create this tool, we wanted to create something that was quite wide encompassing for smaller and medium-sized businesses. But I think we recognise that the complexity of a larger business means that you're more likely to need specialist advice. And we do have some really good companies in Cumbria that can do that at quite a competitive rate. And I think there's been a couple of links put up. Bingo, there we go. Just again in the chat facility.
Hopefully I've sent that to the right people, not just to the panelists. Apologies for that. Okay, lovely. I think that is the end of the questions that I have on the list. If anybody has any other questions, happy to stay here for a little bit longer. We're coming up to 11, but I'm in no rush to leave if anyone has any other questions. Do get in touch. I'll just share my screen for the last time.
Molly, can I just check that? Molly, can I just check that we're sending out all the links afterwards to all the participants? So if they haven't managed to grab them, they'll be able to get it in a follow-up email. Is that correct?
Yes, we will. And we'll send out a link to the recording of this webinar. But as I said earlier, the videos that we've created on the website contain it all again. So if you lose the link to this, then they'll always be there. And there's if you can see my final slide here, there's some follow-up. If you have any queries about the calculator, if you get stuck on anything, you're not quite sure how to enter your data, just email office@cafs.org.uk and that will get passed through to me, and we can help answer any queries. Oh, I did promise whoever answered the question about the wood that I would show you where to put that in. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to I can. I do apologise to everybody. I've got far too many screens. Okay, hopefully, can you see the calculator again? Yeah, okay, so where you can put in the fuel, so if you go to building, and here, these are the different fuel types. So wood pellets here, you can add it in metric tons, in fact, just metric tons. So whatever the amount of wood that you burn in your wood burner, you can put in there, and you don't have to, you can just leave these blank if you don't use any other energy type in your building.
Molly, what happens if you are using a wood burner, like a small domestic wood burner, as opposed to wooden pellets? So, so you're buying sort of like wood in cubic meters and using sort of like a more traditional wood burner as opposed to wooden pellets. Would you just use the same information in there, like wooden pallets?
Yeah, I take it to be wood in whatever form, whether it's logs or pellets. Yeah, just the weight of it, and you put the weight of it that you use into there. So just from a domestic use, we have wood burners at home, and when it comes in, I think it's in 10-kilogram packs that we use. So you just have to do a little bit of a side calculation to work out how many that was in metric tons over the year. So yes, that's where you put it in there. Is there any other questions? No more in the chat. I'm just going to see. Some people have left already, so I think as there's no other questions, I'd like to thank you all for coming along today. Thank you for your questions. Good luck using the calculator, and thank you very much for your support and for your interest.